Hey everyone, it's Jakov, and I'm back again today with a bit of a different video. While I normally look at the unit rosters of factions in the mod Total War Rise of Mordor for the game Total War Attila, the mod linked in the description, or occasionally cover the changes made to the modern updates, instead I'm going to be comparing the physical sizes of the races of Middle-earth as best as I can. In order to do so, in addition to the base mod, I'm also using submods such as the Rise of Mordor unit add-on, which allows me to play as factions made up of a mix of existing factions. For example, getting access to all the Elven units or all the Three Kingdoms of Men. Unfortunately, there's no option as far as I can tell in the faction selection to give me access to every unit in the entire mod, so instead I'll have to do the video in two sections, first covering the different free peoples of Middle-earth and then their enemies, which are also capable of being grouped up as one large faction. Starting off with the free peoples, we'll look at the three races that comprise them, men, elves, and dwarves. To represent their respective races, we have a unit of Dalian swordsmen for men, Erebor axe warriors for dwarves, and Lasgalan blades for elves. One thing to note is that units of the same race are all the same size, so the choice of unit or faction selected doesn't matter anywhere near as much as their race. Comparing the elves to the dwarves, it's obvious that the dwarves are far shorter, only really coming up to the upper torso of the elves. Roughly, the dwarves are said to be around 4.5 feet tall on average, if not shorter, so I'd say the sizing of the dwarves in the mod is pretty damn good. Just more of a testament to the effort the mod creators put into their work. Standing side by side, the men look to be roughly the same size as the elves if not barely smaller, which I'd say makes sense, given that on average, elves were a bit taller than middlemen, that is to say the regular humans in Middle-earth compared to the Numenorians, who are renowned for being very tall people. Due to the size similarities between men and elves, dwarves are similarly as small when compared to men, although the dwarves are somewhat more stout proportion-wise. Moving on to the evil peoples of Middle-earth, we're going to be comparing men, orcs, half-orcs, Orcs, and Uruk-hai, looking to see the size differences between them. As representatives of these different peoples, we have Orc Rabble for regular orcs, Dunherd swordsmen for men, Uruk Throng for Uruks, Goldur blades for Goldur orcs, half-orc axes for half-orcs, and Uruk-hai infantry for Uruk-hai. Just by looking at the Orc Rabble alongside men, it's obvious that they're far smaller and slighter, coming up to the shoulders of the men. While this means that these orcs are slightly taller than the dwarves, physically, the dwarves are a lot more robust than them, and look to be larger. Looking at the Uruks, when compared to the Orc Rabble, they're roughly the same size but larger, which I believe is a way of merging the gap between how orcs and Uruks are portrayed in the Peter Jackson films and the original books. In the books, orcs are stated to be considerably smaller than men, with even the largest of Uruks and Uruk-hai not being as big as an average man. However, in the films, the Uruk-hai are shown to be somewhat taller and beefier than men, while orcs and Uruks are shown to be roughly the same size as men, given they're portrayed by regular-sized men rather than mostly people between 3 and 4 feet of height. As a way of compromising between both versions of orcs and Uruks, both creatures in the mod are somewhat larger than their book counterparts, while not being as large as their film versions. Either way, in comparison to men and elves, they both come out as being shorter, although they do have the aforementioned height advantage over dwarves. Moving on to the Goldur orcs, they're the same size as the Uruks and slightly bigger than the orcs, which is a reflection of their film counterparts, where orcs from Dol Guldur are shown to be quite large, being quite bigger than dwarves but not as tall as men. Moving on to the half-orcs, these creatures are head and shoulders above the orcs, something that makes sense given they're a crossbreed of men and orcs, having the greater size and strength of men while retaining the brutality of orcs, being a stepping stone towards the creation of Uruk-hai. Similarly, the half-orcs also outsize the Dol Guldur orcs and Uruks, only just slightly being smaller than men, a relic of their orc heritage. Moving on to the last species in the mod, we have the Uruk-hai, the pinnacle of orcs and their ilk. Compared to Uruk-hai, the orcs reach only their shoulders, while men are roughly the same size as the Uruk-hai, which, while still larger than their book counterparts, are not as tall as their film versions. When looking at the Uruk-hai alongside their Uruk predecessors, it becomes quite apparent that the Uruk-hai are the taller of the two, having about half a head if not more than the Uruks in height, which also makes sense given that the Uruk-hai are the derived evolution of the Uruk, while the Dol Guldur orcs, who share much the same style in armor, are similarly smaller. Finally, half-orcs are practically the same size as the Uruk-hai, if only a little bit smaller at most, being just as well built in comparison to the lesser orcs, who are quite weedy in comparison when looking at their physical builds. Overall, I found this a fun video to do, helping to underscore just how much effort has been put into the mod by its creators, while also showing off the visual disparity between the different inhabitants of Middle-earth. Not to mention it's the shortest video I've made yet, so it didn't take much effort to edit, something I really appreciate. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please make sure to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. I probably won't be making another video looking at the heights of races in the near future. However, I am considering potentially doing unit rankings, as well as diversifying into other mods. This is your host Jakov, signing out.